This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you and welcome everyone. It is 5 o'clock and I will call the meeting to order. And Mr. Okins, would you do roll call?
Councilman Nelson.
Here.
Councilman Fagerly.
Here.
Councilman Plowman.
Here.
Councilman Osmus.
Here.
Councilman Schwantes.
Here.
Councilman Davis.
Here.
Councilman Meske.
Here.
Councilman Alvarado.
Here.
Mayor Kelvin.
Here.
Also in attendance, Madam Chair, our City Administrator Gromitz, Finance Director Okins, Planner Sarah Swedberg, Councilman-elects Michael O'Brien, Justin Ask, and Fire Chief Frank Hansen.
Okay, thank you very much. If no one has an objection, just out of respect to everyone's time, I don't think that the Main Street budget amendment would take very long. Would it be okay if we move that up so Sarah can decide whether she wants to stay with us or go enjoy her evening? So is there any objection? If not, Ms. Swedberg.
Thank you. All right. Final budget amendment for Main Street of the year. We have a few changes that need to be made in this resolution just to finish out some projects that will be for some dollars that will be spent yet here in 2020. So three kind of main changes to highlight as a quick reminder and update for new council elects. Main Street had some money left over in 2019 at the tune of about $15,000. $4,000 of that has already been appropriated for this downtown assessment project that we're currently working on, which leaves $11,000 roughly yet to be spent. Because this is in a special fund, those dollars do kind of remain earmarked for about 2 years for those dollars to be spent. So it is the board's intention to fully spend all of the money. We have identified a number of projects that will be carried out with this extra money from 2019, namely some flower pots and plantings for those, a few small updates to Selvig, above and beyond the money in the special fund for Selvig, some downtown signage, a building inventory project that we're partnering with the Historical Society on, and some various other smaller things. The money that we plan to spend in 2020 is about $9,800 of that $11,000 that is left. $7,200 of that will go towards the hiring of somebody for this building inventory update. The last time that this happened with the Historical Society was in 2005, so it's well time to update that. Just kind of gets a snapshot of the businesses and the buildings and kind of their condition. And then we're also adding in some other kind of data that we'd like to collect from a Main Street standpoint as well. So we'll be hiring out. The Historical Society is working on that right now to have kind of an independent contractor just for that particular project. And then we're also purchasing some 24-inch flower pots from Stacy's Nursery, and some of the remaining money will be spent in 2021 towards the planting of those pots. Those will be on the ground, water reservoirs in them, so they only have to be filled a couple times a year. I won't go into too much more detail than that unless anybody's interested. Those are about $200 a piece, and we're going to order 13 of them. So that comes out to about $2,600. And then we're also adding in the third item is an additional $11,000 into our budget because Blue Cross Blue Shield added a second component to the public art projects that we're working on. So we already received $16,000 for a sculpture project. And this is an additional $11,000 for a mural. And both projects are focused on kind of memorializing and visualizing the welcoming resolution that council passed in 2018. So with that, it would be staff recommendation to move forward the approval and adoption of a resolution to amend the budget appropriating an additional $20,800.
Okay, I will be looking for a motion from the Finance Committee to adopt that resolution to amend the budget for the 20,800.
Plowman, so moved.
Fager.
All right, we have a motion and a second to adopt the resolution to amend the budget appropriating the additional 20,800. Is there any questions or discussion? Councilmember Osmus.
A couple of things. Where's that money coming from? Or is it just moving?
So let's see what it would be. The 9,800 is coming from, it's just moving with money we had left over from 2019. And then the additional 11,000 for the public art is a donation from Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Okay, just clarifying that it isn't new money that we're having to come up with.
Correct.
20.
Nope, no new
Okay.
money.
Okay, second thing, I'm very happy that there's gonna be flowers and flower pots. Hallelujah. Number 3, have all of the little hand-painted squares been put on benches around town? Or is there still some waiting for a spot?
I'm not 100% on that question. That's a project between the Arts Council and Blue Cross Blue Shield. Bill Gossman was the lead artist on that project. So I know that the Arts Council is trying to figure out the logistics of having another artist or Yeist, his son, kind of finish out. I know that the original intention was for there to be about 8 benches around town, and I think 5 of them have been placed. So there is the potential for more to go out, but I'm not quite sure what the plan is on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions on the resolution? If not, we need to do roll call.
Councilman Fagerly,
Aye.
Councilman Plowman,
Aye.
Councilman Osmus,
Aye.
Councilman Nelson.
Aye.
4 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you.
Councilman Nelson, you have your on mute.
You couldn't read my lips? I apologize. I said thank you to Sarah for her work and thank you for being with us tonight. And she's welcome to stay unless she wants to head out. And we'll go back to our first item, which is the mayor's proposed 2021 budget. And I believe that Administrator Gramitz is prepared to walk us through this information.
Mr. Gramitz, you have yours on mute as well.
What I said was, Steve, take it away. No, actually what I said was you've had your budget binder for quite a while. And we have fielded a few questions by council members on specific items during this past time. We've had 2 opportunities to kind of talk about it in general terms. And tonight, I think Steve was prepared to back up any questions that might come up regarding the capital, the vehicles, and any remaining questions on revenues, but primarily focusing in on the expense side of the general fund, which includes all of the categories that you would find in your binder. Some of the highlights that we want to point out, which should have come in your agenda packet. There was a series of materials, but one of the first items is the general fund operating expenses. That's a recap of the highlights of the changes, potentially things that were included and not included in the complete 2021 budget. The first thing that I would point out is that there was a position included under the city administrator department. It had a projected value of 198,725. That would actually be closer to 115, I think, as I have alluded to in other meetings. And then also there was an increase in the budget in 2020 for the administrator position over the adopted 2020 budget. Mayor and city council has a slight reduction of professional services.
I just wondered if we should just ask if anybody has any questions or wants to have a discussion about each category as we go through. If there isn't any, we can just move through them. If there is, I think it would be helpful to have that discussion before we move on.
Hey,
that
that
be
would
okay?
speed things up. That's fine with me. Anybody got any questions on city administrator or mayor council? Planning and development services or city clerk? Assessing?
Mr. Gramitz, would you review the additional position for Main Street Community Outreach Coordinator? That was, I believe in the budget is 2 different positions with 2 different amounts. Do we know that information? Or can we just talk about that a minute?
Yeah.
Or are we talking about one full-time?
It basically was one full-time equivalent. It would actually have been 2 individual people, and at the present time, I don't know that we really have a 50-50 split, or is it 55-45 split? We do know that it was anticipated that the 2 positions would not be considered full-time, and with that would not necessarily qualify for the health insurance and things of that nature, but they would be split into 2 positions to handle the Main Street and the outreach coordinator activities. So we did not expect there to be 1 person hired full-time, but 2 part-time individuals, and we've kind of left these split up for the final decision. It could be 2 40% positions. It doesn't even necessarily end up having to be 100%.
The other question that I would ask, just the community outreach coordinator, is there a reason that that is under that department and not under administration?
I don't think there's any particular reason, and unless Steve is aware of one. I guess my thought is it has to go someplace, and since it is utilizing some of the same probably connections that the Main Street program has, that it might be of value to keep it in one area, having two part-time positions in one area.
That was the reason it was put into that department, was because the Main Street activities are being charged to there in the current year budget.
Yeah, maybe it's more about a reporting structure, just the concern of, how we're setting up reporting, and just to look at the overall organizational chart. I think that has been an issue for me, even when I look at assistant administrator and some of those. So I'm just curious about understand what they're trying to do, but just a question with the relationship with the department and who reports to who.
Okay.
Councilmember Meske.
When we addressed these positions in labor, because we looked at and tossed around these job descriptions, is it still the expectation that at some point down the road, the expansion of the Main Street position into a full-time position, as being a member of that, I thought that was the long-term plan. I know that's not the initial plan of getting this going. I know it's going to amp up a bit. Is that still the plan, is to move that into a full-time position at some point in the future?
Yeah, that's the plan. The agreement we have with Main Street is that we're supposed to have, one full-time equivalent person or one full-time person. Now, we in the past have utilized one equivalent full-time person. So that means taking a little bit from a bunch of people and adding it up to a full-time position roughly. So this is the first step in bringing somebody on board that might get, let's say it's 50%, that, next year we might want to amp it up to 70%. And then following year after that, eventually get to a one full-time equivalent as per our agreement that we signed, as a community to support that program. Sarah might have more specific information on that, or she may not.
I think you
Councilmember
covered.
Brahman. I'm sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, I just said I think Brian covered it well.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Plowman, did you have a question?
No, I think I understand what's going on now. Thanks.
Okay. Are there any other questions regarding this? All right. Back to you, Mr. Gramitz.
All right, I'm assuming we'll have lots of questions on the city clerk category, but maybe not. Moving on to assessing, this is just an increase, obviously, due our contract. Any questions on finance? Maybe just as a recap, so everybody's on the same page. In 2020, we had allocated funds for a account clerk in finance. In 2020, we kind of discussed for 2021, increasing that position to an assistant finance director. So there's an additional set of dollars that increased that position that was not filled in 2020 and anticipated to be filled in 2021. In either case, it will either be an account clerk or an assistant finance director as deemed appropriate by the city council. Any questions on legal? Okay, question there. Fernando.
Councilmember Alvarado, yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you just give a background, City Administrator Gramitz, on why we're looking at positions for an assistant finance director and a assistant administrator for the council members elect, so they have an understanding as why we're doing this? Can you just kind of give them the background of why we're looking at those positions, please? Thank you.
Sure, I can do that. The underlying principle is called succession planning. And that is if someone were to leave, that you're not left leaderless. And that's on the city level as far as the city administrator, and also on the department level as well as the finance director. Most cities our size have some aspect of an assistant city administrator. And I've noticed that when I take a 2-week vacation, yes, I can appoint somebody to take my place, but they're not only taking my place, but they're also doing their own job in that time period. And then secondly, as far as the city administrator position is concerned, that's historically a learning entry-level position that somebody comes into, and it's anticipated that they could be gone in 3 years. You know, they garner enough knowledge out of school that they can go and be a city administrator in another community. All right, so having said that, it's a learning tool, but it's also I don't want to call it a catch-all, but it's a special projects kind of position. And in Wilmer today, I would have utilized that person to oversee the local option sales tax construction projects. I would not get into the weeds into negotiating contracts and stuff like that. That would have been, the assistant's position to do. So, and then monitor the pay requests and schedule things with finance for payment and stuff like that. So it's a much more hands-on learning type of a position. And in the case that an administrator were to leave and go to another community, you've got somebody that is knowledgeable of what's going on and that can kind of take the helm for 6 months while you search for a new administrator. Or in the more positive approach, that your assistant has been such a good employee and has shown that they have the stuff that they can take over the reins and be appointed the city administrator. The same thing holds true with the assistant finance director. While we may have a need for an account clerk, we really don't have an assistant finance director to take the lead and to be trained in on how Wilmer does things, so that at some point in time, let's say due to a retirement, we don't bring somebody in who's never seen our department. We've got a transition time period that somebody can monitor things, but then also, if again, they've shown themselves to be good qualified employees, that potentially they could be considered for the director position also. The question, I guess, is in finance, I think Steve Okens, our finance director, he's been here a long time. I don't want to go into the number of decades, but it's my understanding he arrived here as more or less the assistant finance director, and that might be something we've kind of gone away from just a little bit. And so it is my professional opinion that we kind of go back to that. We still have, additional person in finance to help do the day-to-day tasks, but we also have somebody to take some of the higher level activities that the finance director does and spread out some of that work. So if you lose one or the other, you're not losing, the whole knowledge base. So that's it's succession planning, looking to the future, trying to make sure we have all our bases covered, and for the most part, get all the work done in a reasonable structure that makes sense. So that's kind of the history behind it. I mean, we have assistant city engineers, and we don't call it that. I believe we call the assistant police chief the captain, but in essence is the assistant police chief. And so we do have that in other departments. We just don't have it in all of them, and that's why they were implemented in this particular budget.
Are there any other questions or comments on the new positions that are being proposed? Councilmember Alvarado.
I think it's important to remind us that Wilmer is a regional city. We're a small city, and I think our numbers will show, hopefully after the census, that we're probably growing, a growing city. So I think it's important that the leadership realizes that as we go forward, and the need to have an assistant administrator, an assistant finance director. We are the city in the West Central Minnesota, and we have to plan for that succession and growth. So these are our financial points that are needed to be addressed, and I think they're important to be addressed positively because we are a regional community. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just looking to see if there's any other questions. The only other comment I would make is the budget was built with a 3% tax increase, but if you add up these positions, that's pretty much why it is necessary. Am I not correct, Mr. Gramitz?
Well, yeah, I mean, generally speaking, you know, we're seeing a 10% increase in healthcare. We're seeing, you know, a CPI of 1.2% on products purchased. This is just, you know, one of many parts of why the increase, you know, was in the budget. You know, like in 2020, you may not have, you know, bought another vehicle, you know, so from year to year, it kind of fluctuates as to what your needs are. And in 2021, these two positions, as well as the two part-time positions, were the ones that were included to try and move the staffing issue forward.
Okay, I'm looking around. Are there any other expense items starting with City Hall?
All right. Yeah, any questions on City Hall?
Councilmember Schwantes.
Thank you. I'm considering the items listed here for City Hall more placeholders than actual expected expenses that may or may not occur. Depending on how quickly we move forward with the City Hall Community Center project, it may very well not be prudent to spend the dollars on this, but rather on other fees associated with the City Hall Community Center going forward. And so I just want to recognize that hopefully that project will move forward next year, and we'll have a whole nother conversation about financing of it. But I think we need to recognize that if it is moving forward as it should, these would not be reasonable expenses to be incurring.
Just for clarification, they are not included in the budget, correct? These are items that were not funded. So I think we're all in a same agreement with that. So,
but I think what's interesting is though that if something were to happen outside of our control, we'll have to address it. And those are emergency situations. But at the present time, we're not looking at doing any of the capital that's listed here. And we'll see what next year brings, because you know, I think as we continue to work on City Hall, you know, obviously a decision will be made at some point in time. So hopefully sooner than later. All right, any questions on information technology, office services, human resources, and elections? And
I'm just going to go to information technology, just to ask the question. I can't remember a year that we haven't had some requests for information technology, and just a concern that are we staying up to date everywhere that we need to? And I know that we use CARES money for that, but are we being progressive with what we need to do in technology?
I believe we're attempting to be as progressive as is reasonable. We did use CARES funds to upgrade equipment that we have at City Hall and some of our other facilities, as well as individual, you know, laptops and computers and those kind of things. There's always things that we could do to make our citizens' lives a little bit better. One of the things that we were looking at was the see, click, fix sort of applications that citizens can download to their phone. They see a pothole, they take a picture of it, it accepts the coordinates of where the pothole is, and they send it to City Hall, and it gets routed to the street department, and then they go fix it when they got time, you know, to schedule that in. So there's applications out there, and we currently we're working through those type of software issues, that we have access to existing software that we already have licenses for, and that it might take maybe a little bit of programming to make a couple of things expand into what we would like to see happen. I know City of Mankato did that. They took an existing software program they had added more to it to make it a much better experience for the residents, and they can follow their repair work. I think the city council members can check in their ward and see what issues are being identified and how soon they're getting fixed. But those, that's all the extra software that has to be built into it. And so we're going to be working towards that. Dr. Ramstad is kind of leading the charge on that because his department has access to that software. So the answer, I think, to the chairman is that we did a lot of things with the CARES funds, but we can always do more, and we'll continue to work at trying to make the experience of submitting a complaint about snow removal or potholes easier for the residents, so they can see that the work is getting done. So we're not 100% done, but we're working towards it.
Thank you. We'll let you continue on. Any other questions? I don't see anyone.
All right, we're down to public safety in the police department. They had requested one additional position. I think the police department got finally up to full speed. And of course, that's a rarity in the PD because people retire, people leave, and then it takes so long to fill a position, to go through all that whole process, that by the time you fill it, somebody else has retired. But they were up to full speed. They had asked for one additional position, which was called a forensic technician analyst. Currently, we are utilizing the services of another entity to do those kind of things. And just given the fact that we were at full staffing when this was instituted, that we were trying to push that off for another year until we could bring that position in. So at this point in time, that was not funded. There were a few fluctuations. Fuel's going to go up and go down. Communications has to do with the 800 megahertz system. And the one thing that probably is most identifiable that makes relatively no difference is something we'll be talking about later as an action item. And that's just simply that the law enforcement center rents are all over with. 2020, they're done. But then the utilities and the operational costs, really start in earnest, which makes, in essence, no difference in the dollar amount. So it doesn't go up and doesn't really go down. It goes down maybe $10,000, but in the big scheme of things, it's not earth-shattering.
Mr. Gramitz, before you move on to the next page, is that forensic technician analyst, is that have a possibility of being a revenue generating position if we were to hire that?
Anything is possible. This is not an officer position, as I was told. This is more of a staff technician person, and they're the ones that go through your phones and go through your laptops and do all that computerized IT stuff in law enforcement. So could we build a department that does that? I believe you probably could, because we're utilizing the services of another department for that same purpose. So the question, quite honestly, is how much are we using that we should afford to hire one full-time person to do it? And I think that day is coming. To be quite honest, my son is an officer in Carver County, and he's a detective, and this is all he does. And they have two people in their department that all they do is go through computers and cell phones and things of that nature, and they do the entire county, all the cities for the entire county. So Does Wilmer need to have one dedicated person? I don't know yet, but it probably stands to reason that we could probably utilize the services of another department for one more year, and then, you know, take more of a measurement of how much we're using and see if in 2022 that we bring that back.
Thank you.
Then under capital requests, the radar trailer was actually done in 2020, so it doesn't need to be done in 2021. And their requested secure garage was not funded as a capital item. The purchase of 4 squads was included. Any questions?
How close does that put us to all news? Or I know we were trying to get to the new type of squad car. Are we getting close?
Well, actually, the 4 vehicles that they're acquiring this year, the ones that were on the list weren't necessarily, like detective cars and some other things, but there was 1 squad car in there. So I think generically it says squad cars, but it really was 3 regular cars and one squad car. That's what I pulled out this afternoon. I don't know, Steve, if I'm wrong, let me know, but that's what I saw. All right, fire department. Any questions on fire department? The outdoor sign, which was not funded, was funded under CARES dollars. So you should have seen it light up this last Wednesday. And we'll be utilizing that sign for, you know, emergency notices and community notices. In essence, that may deal with getting immunizations, you know, for the COVID-19. Where do you go? What times, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the reason why that was utilized. It's another source of getting information out besides Facebook and telephone alerts and things of that nature. I believe the storage shed was also handled this year, so that's something that doesn't need to be dealt with next year. And then the deputy chief's vehicle was not funded. Neither was the larger mower, and the turnout gear was, they were looking to try and obtain a grant to help fund the second set of firemen bunker gear when they respond to fires. That again has to deal with if they go into a house and it's got somebody who has got COVID-19, you know, then that bunker gear, uniforms and stuff should not go out, you know, right away to the next fire. It should probably sit for 3 days and then get reused at a later date. So the idea is to have 2 sets. Many fire departments are doing that, but the idea is we're going to try and find grants to fund that, and then we'll see what happens. The deputy chief vehicle, although not funded, I did note to you early on that the assistant city administrator position was not 198,000, but was more 115. And so what I guess what I was proposing was, if we were going to leave the budget static, that you could utilize the funds that were already in the budget that were probably not going to be used for that line item, and switch them over to assist in funding the fire department assistant chief vehicle. We would trade in the old vehicle and use any funds to make up the difference for the assistant vehicle. It has its issues like any older vehicle, but we're going to hopefully get through this year and do something next year. but if you allow the funds to stay in there, I would swap them from administration to fire department, so we could probably get that done this year.
Administrator Grammets,
Yes.
is that a request that you want to make a change to the budget now with that conversation for people to consider? Or are you proposing that if the budget is approved as is? I mean, I heard kind of both directions. If that makes a difference to council members, I'm not quite sure.
I'm open to whichever way, you know, anybody wants to review this. But if you don't fund the city administrator, then you can't fund the fire truck. The
Got it.
assistant city administrator. So the idea is, you know, this is in flux. This is one of those questions that you can ask yourself, how do I want to do this? And what's my priorities? And what should I fund? So that's just one of those questions you may want to ask yourself at the end after you've gone through everything.
Okay. I had two other questions. The reduced salaries, is that just the volunteer fire that salary? Is that what we're talking about?
That is correct, Madam Chair, and that's based on actual call usage that the department has had historically over the last 3 years.
Okay, thank you. Then the other question I had was the turnout gear. Is that not something we could have funded with CARES dollars? Or if there's additional funds that we could use that, since it has a specific reason that relates to the pandemic?
I think the answer is maybe. I'm just gonna, you know, go into, I guess, my explanation. This was basically, you know, brought up underneath, you know, let's just pay taxes for it. And the question came up was, well, are there any grant funds out there, you know, for this kind of thing? And then when it got down to the CARES funding, to be quite honest, you know, we spent money on fire department coveralls. I can't remember, maybe Frank remembers how much that was, you know. Frank, do you remember? $30,000. I don't think it was 30,000, but you got some coveralls actually for going into locations that potentially may have COVID-19. And so we had already acquired those, ordered them. Do you have a number for that?
Actually, those were on, we applied for a grant for some of that as well.
Okay.
But I think the turnout gear, when we talked about it, just didn't quite fit the requirements of the CARES dollars. And we were looking at, because it's a multi-purpose thing. It's not strictly for COVID-19. It's also, the reason we get it is also for like cancer prevention and stuff like that for our firefighters. So it didn't quite fit the requirements, and I don't think that we wanted or we dared stretch it or felt that that was the right way of using that money.
Yeah, I believe I remember that also. You know, there was 3 questions you had to ask yourself when you spend CARES money, and that seemed a little weak on my part. You know, there are some cities that spend CARES money in some very unique ways, but my job is not to put the city of Wilmer's name on the front page of the newspaper, and we just, you know, kind of made a decision that was a stretch too far for us. Any other questions?
Not seeing
All right.
any, not seeing
Okay.
any.
All right. Non-departmental or public works. Any questions on the public works items? Transit, engineering, stormwater, and or public works. There's a lot of capital in the public works. One thing I do want to point out is that the lead time on some of this equipment runs out about a year. By the time you order it and it gets put into production, and like some of our vehicles will have a box on the back or snowplow on the front or whatever. when you take that truck and run it down the line and have all the equipment placed on it, it can take a year or more to even get it on site after you've ordered it. So some things like the dump truck, you know, and the loader, those are pretty big ticket items. Other ones, maybe not nearly as much. So we tried to keep them to the ones that absolutely positively need addressing. All right, any other questions on the information that's there?
Any questions on Public Works? It's pretty silent.
All right. Going past non-departmental, heading to Culture and Recreation. RAC 8, any questions? Library? Auditorium? You note in auditorium, the biggest item there, Sean, you've got a question.
Well, I was just going to ask you, I mean, I've been a pretty strong advocate for doing renovations on the auditorium, and we many times say we're going to do these repairs on the auditorium, and then we don't do the repairs on the auditorium and we kick the can down the road, and the list gets longer and more expensive. And we keep saying we squirrel these dollars away to do the repairs on the auditorium, but yet those repairs have not been done. And I'm hoping that there's not a time that happens when there's a prettier project that comes along and then people say, well, there's a nice big pot of money here to wrestle away from the repairs that the auditorium so desperately needs. I will remind everybody that you don't need to be reminded, but that building, it was the heart and soul of this city for decades. And it is seen as a major, it's on the historical landmark listings for Minnesota. I'm just curious, can you tell me what direction we're going with the auditorium and when? I mean, I know there's dollars that are said, we're not gonna have more dollars from this year for doors and gutters, but then there's this large fund that we've accumulated from the previous years. Do we have a plan to start laying those dollars into the auditorium?
Yeah, generally the answer is yes. It's unfortunate that COVID-19 occurred because we would have tried to, you know, do more with the auditorium. But the $40,000 that we're highlighting for professional services, that is to bring in an outside historic consultant that will look at the building, do the analysis, which then qualifies us for state historical grant program. So our, $735,000 could, in essence, be turned into $2.4 million by going through a grant program. The first step in that is having this consultant come in and identify all the good things about it, because that lays the groundwork for all the grants in the future. Been through this before, nothing new, but step one is to get that analysis done, and the sooner the better, so we can get into the cycle for the grants that are coming down the pike on an annual basis. So we could take our money and do the things we want to do right now, but I think the goal was to try and tag a few of those state grants to use our funds as maybe 30% and get a 70% grant. So that's the direction we're going. I've had discussions with Dr. Ramstad, and we're going to be heading in that direction. As well as Mr. Christensen in Public Works. We need to coordinate both our efforts in order to make that happen. So this would be another one of those, projects that, could be overseen and by an assistant, and take a little bit of pressure off of the department heads in order to move this on down the road. So we got projects. We know we have things we got to do. The option is, do we just fund them ourselves, or do we try and access state monies? And we're going to try and access that with getting step 1 done in 2021.
I just want to just make a comment here too and thank Councilman Romeski. I know he and I have had lots of conversations about the auditorium and the historic preservation. And one of the concerns that I have is that if we do something temporary, that we mess it up for that historic designation or obtaining other funding. And so I think the commitment I would hope is that this consultant, that this takes place early in 2021 so that we can move forward with looking at what options there are or be ready to do that. I know you had stated that too. So I'm glad to see that the historic consultant is in there and that we're on hold with the funds that we have dedicated. So any other comments from anyone else before we move on? Questions? Councilmember Alvarado.
Thank you. I just want to kind of echo what Madam Chair Nelson said. I think it's important that we try to get that consultant here sooner than later. We have kicked the can down the road. I've going on 4 years, and we've seen it go down the road 3 of those 4 years. So I'm excited. I'm very excited and optimistic about this consultant and the work that he can do for the city auditorium. That is a jewel. It has history. So very exciting. So I hope to echo the Madam Chair, I hope we have that sooner than later also. Thank you.
I'm not seeing anyone else. Oops, excuse me. I'll go ahead, Mr. Gramitz.
Okay, under non-departmental on the last page, you'll see the city civic requests that the city is funding. And then item number 2 is the request we received that we did not fund. And any questions on those?
Madam Chair, Administrator Gromitz, there is one other request that we received that did not get funded from the Candy Ohio Historical Society for $15,000. That just got missed on the listing of non-funded requests.
Just one question. Is the Southwest Initiative Foundation, is that new this year? I'm trying to remember whether we had that request before or not.
Madam Chair, all the requests that were not funded would have been somewhat new requests or not funded in the past. The only ones that were funded were ones that were funded historically in the past.
Well, I knew we'd had a request from the food shelf before, so I just was curious. So thank you for that clarification. Go ahead, Mr. Gramitz.
Yeah, I would suspect that we probably received a Southwest Initiative Foundation request, but it just wasn't funded. Okay, Parks and Recreation is the next area. Anybody have anything that they are interested in seeing? What was funded in the capital was playground equipment with continued process to acquire playground equipment at lower costs at the end of the year, like we're doing in 2020, getting these grants from the different location or different businesses so that we can get more for the dollar, and it usually gets installed the following year. So 2020's equipment here in the fall would get installed in 2021, 2021's equipment in 2022. The Trishaw bike addition is there. Things that were not funded, basketball court, and the lights at Swanson Field at red, yellow, and green.
I do have one question on the Trishaw bike, and I want to go on record as being supportive of it. I'm just wondering where it's going to have a home and how much administrative costs and who's going to do that. With being familiar with the with the bikes that are being used in the long-term care facilities, there is a fair amount of training and a fair amount of responsibility to use that. And so if we're going to purchase that, which I think would be great with the other bike programs that we have going on, I'm just concerned with, we're struggling somewhat with a home for the bike maintenance and some of those types of things. So just wanting to know if we're going to be reinforcing bike services with this purchase.
I was under the understanding that the mayor was going to be maintaining it, but since there's, I think it's in his job description. No, I would anticipate it would be in the same vein as the other bikes that we have, that they'll all be grouped together, you know, under one program, so that we don't have different entities fixing this or controlling that or figuring stuff out.
Okay, and
Madam,
I was just concerned about the maintenance dollars with that, because I know that the bike group has raised funds for their bikes. I think they're through, I mean, that money has been used up, but I want this to be successful if we're going to purchase it, and to find a way to be supportive. So if there's more that we need to do to make this a positive, then that would be a request if we're going to spend the $12,000.
Madam Chair, this is the mayor.
Go ahead, Mayor Calvin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an item that if the council chose to remove from the budget, the reason it was originally included in the budget is that there was not a number of these throughout the community. And as you have stated, there have been a number of the long-term care facilities that have received these through grants through Vision 2040, through the Wilmer Area Community Foundation, and other areas. So if there's a concern about the maintenance of it, and I know there has been a concern about the maintenance of the bikes that we are currently using, and I'll call them the white bikes. I know they have a name, but that certainly would be an item that if the council wished, they could certainly remove that item.
Thank you, Mayor Calvin. I wanted to go the other way. I want this for us to purchase it. I just want to strengthen the bike program and make sure that we have access to staff that can help us to do that. And I think this would be, you know, be one, but I know you are aware, and so am I, of the requirements for training and how to use it. And so I just want to make sure we're prepared to do it right. But I'm supportive of purchasing the bike if we can make sure that staff is embracing the bike program.
Okay, any other questions? Yep, I see one.
Councilmember Osmus.
Okay, so just to piggyback on your comments about it, so who is going to be responsible then? Is that Public Works? Is that community? Is that community center, because she takes care of the other bike program? As far as like which facility is going to have it and for how long?
I think that's the question. I think the bike is important, but I think there's some work to do with staff. I'm not sure we're prepared to do that, and maybe we can have an answer back on that before we make our decision on the budget.
I guess my thought is we could take that off, because then the responsibility is on each one of the facilities for maintenance, for liability, for training, and whatever needs to happen at each one of their facilities.
I would put in a request before we remove it, that we just review it with the bike group or the bike staff that are assigned to see, is this something they're willing to take on with the rest of it? Because I do think it would be, I heard what Mayor Calvin says. Yes, there are other entities doing that, but if this is an opportunity for the city to enhance it, I'm fine with that. I just think that there needs to be, that conversation should take place about the maintenance, and whether it's Public Works or whether it's other staff, There is someone working at the community center that's been helping with the bike program, and so I would just, I guess, ask staff to report back to us on that before we remove it, would be my request.
Second question. With only 1 month left in the year with Park and Rec activities because of cancellation of programming and probably not having as much equipment needs, and whether it's t-shirts, whether it's trophies or all that stuff, do we have any ballpark figure yet of funds that might be carried over that haven't been used from 2020 into 2021? Or, I mean, do we have any idea?
Mr. Elkins.
We are presently still working on that analysis that we talked about at our last meeting. The Park and Rec director is out presently. And so in order to really review that with him, he would need to then come back into the office. So it should be ready for our first finance meeting in December.
Mr. Elkins, though, but if there is just funds left over from different departments, it goes into the general fund, does it not? That gets carried over to see whether it is spent or not, and then gets used to supplement the budget in a future year?
That has been past practice, but the council certainly could appropriate it prior to that process.
Okay. Is that okay, Julie?
Yeah, I would think that right now, without programming going on, even if the chair is, or the director is out, each one of those departments should be able to calculate. They've got time right now to calculate those figures, I would think.
But this would just be a question for me, is I don't think we do true cost accounting. So to say where the funds are and where they aren't, maybe I'm wrong, but to me, it's kind of a lump sum right now. So how would we by program? But if that's a request, I don't know, Administrator Gramitz or Mr. Elkins, do you have any comments?
Yeah, we have finalized like for the aquatic center, for instance, but we are just confirming with them. So I don't have that with me, but I certainly can send that out with an email for the aquatic center, since that was closed all season. We had some additional maintenance, but the actual other programs like flag football or some of the other ones, I would need to confer with either the director or one of his staff members.
Mr. Elkins, when do you think you would have, like, November, numbers that you run them through the accounting that you could project, till the end of the year just to do an estimate?
The November numbers will be out tomorrow, actually.
Okay. So we've got some, a week or so to probably come up with a projection. It doesn't help us tonight, mind you, but it is safe to say that even though you would assume that there are some savings because we're not operating, it actually kind of goes in the opposite direction. And that is because, like the 4-week pause that the governor put on, we didn't shut the compressors down on the ice. So we have all of that expense occurring every day. We don't have the offsetting revenue that would cover that. So all we have are expenses. So instead of saying like you're going to have money left over in Park and Rec, it's very possible we're actually in the other camp, and that is we're in the red because we don't have the revenue to offset that for programming. So let's see what Steve and I can put together on guesstimates as to where we are. But in the big scheme of things, I think the comment was made, any leftover money goes into next year and can be utilized, as the city council sees fit. One thing I will also point out, something that probably most of the council is not aware of, even though our staff out at Park and Rec we did not lay them off because of a 4-week pause. What we did do was assign them to other departments that were looking for work to get done that they couldn't get done. So 2 staff went out to the police department to do things that hadn't been getting done for a long time, and the chief wanted them done. And so that's helping them out. And I believe the other 2 staff were working with IT to get some things accomplished that wouldn't normally get accomplished. So we can allocate their wages to other departments for this period, but overall, it's not like we just turned them out on unemployment and said, you're done, we'll call you back when it's time to come back. We're trying to get productive work out of the Park and Rec staff because they are good employees, and we want to show them that we respect their abilities, and as long as we can get good stuff being done, we'll try and keep them on. It's when we run out of things that we have to then make hard decisions. Right now, we haven't run out of things.
Okay. Any other
That's
questions?
Yep.
Right now, our request for additional information, are we good? All right, Administrator Gramitz.
All right, anything on Civic Center? As I mentioned, we continue to run. Hopefully the 4-week pause is only 4 weeks. Community Center, Aquatic Center, and then transfers. Airport debt service is all done. And that pretty well sums up the highlights of the changes that we as staff saw in the budget. Otherwise, it's basically the same.
All right, do any council members have any requests for additional information on what we've covered so far tonight? I am not seeing anything. So are we gonna move on, or is the revenue, the general fund, is this just here for our, or we'll go back to you and let you talk us through this?
Steve, could you do the revenue?
The page that you are presently looking at is a summary of the revenues that has some historical actual numbers and the budget numbers that we talked about. I'm going to jump back to the front page here, and the increases that we are projecting again in revenues is the general property taxes of a 3% increase in the rate. That will generate about $308,000 of additional in property taxes. We have received official notification. Now, this will be subject to change if the legislature unallots or decreases, but the state has notified us that we were intended to get approximately $157,000 additional in local government aid for next year. The transfers that we have additional in revenue, now that the city engineering staff is in full complement, instead of spending those dollars on consultants, we historically have transferred money from the street projects or any projects that they do into the general operating fund to cover engineering costs that may be incurred. Decreases that we anticipate in the revenue side were building permits. We're expecting those to be down by 13% or $50,000. That's just due to the economic conditions, but activity is staying steady, and actually that we may have to take a second look at that building permits fees and the activity does not seem to be slowing down as much as what we had anticipated. Interest earnings, again, we're projecting 22% less than this year, and that would be a decrease of $49,000. Again, indications are that there might be a slight uptick in interest rates, but not substantial enough to maybe change that number. So we will continue to monitor that as well. Rents, we're reducing the rents due to Mid-Minnesota no longer renting the bottom of the city office building. Insurance reimbursements are down. We're projecting those to be down by 33% or $50,000 due to a reduction of the number of retired employees still on health insurance. A lot of those that took their early buyout or retired have reached age 65, and so they no longer will be on that. And so those reimbursements, which were an in and an out, will no longer be there. Also, refunds and reimbursements, we're projecting to be reduced due to Rice Hospital lease, and that the reimbursements for the Rice Care Center will go directly to Caris Health. Potential revenues that we did not include or were not included in the mayor's proposed budget, we have looked in the past as a possible CenterPoint Energy franchise fee. That was not included in the past. Those projections and communications with CenterPoint Energy could possibly produce $250,000 to $300,000 a year. The council, the property tax increase at the time of this notification could have been increased, but at this point with truth in taxation, the requirement and setting the preliminary levy, that is no longer an option for the council. Sale of excess land. The city has, and we are producing a map where we have 100 acres of undeveloped land in the presently platted industrial park. And there's approximately 370 acres of excess land west of the platted industrial park or the former airport site. So those are the revenues that we had looked at and made changes to. And again, here's a summary page of those different classifications of revenues.
Okay, any questions on any of that information requests? All right, I'm not seeing anything. Are we gonna move? Oh, go ahead, Councilmember Alvarado, sorry.
No, I had to step away for a moment. Should we talk about that franchise fee? Should we think about maybe phasing it in over a 2 to 3 year period, or is there? I just see that we're taking on, we're looking at a city administrator, we're looking at an assistant finance director. Is this something that we should bring up for conversation anyhow and see if a phase-in program might be established to, get people used to the idea, or I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there for a conversation piece. Thank you.
Thank you. The question I had about that was, if in the future that's something that we need to do, what's the time frame that we need to start that? And I know when we've had these conversations before, a tax is a tax is a tax, depending on, it's all coming out of the pocket. So which one does it make sense to do? It brings the thought to mind that I think I saw Mr. Okins at the league, or Mr. Gramitz too, that the League of Minnesota Cities sent out a list of tax rates and information on cities. Did anyone see that?
Yes, Madam Chair. They have counties, cities, townships, school districts, and special taxing districts all on the one notification. And we can certainly forward that to all the council members as well.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for us to understand where we are when it comes to our taxes versus, with that. And, I'm looking at Councilmember Meske, but I know that he and I had a conversation about that $4 fee now that we've assessed the utilities, and we're staying with that $4 fee, to be honest about what the name of that should be, because it isn't what it was set up to do. And if we're going to keep charging it, that we should come up with the appropriate way to be disclosing that. So And that's that's built into the budget, so doesn't appear that it's something we're interested in reducing, but I do think how we name it and how we disclose it was something we talked about last year when we asked the utilities to pick that up. So it feels like something that should be finished on that one too. So any questions? Anybody else? Thoughts on that? I'm not seeing any. I shut my mic off. I apologize. Are we going to go through the capital improvement program? I think the one thing that's always interesting for me is what we're not funding and what we might be pushing back down the road. And I understand, where we're at, but I think it's helpful for us to understand the requests versus what we're actually doing. I don't know who wants to take that.
I certainly can, Mr. Gromits, if you want me to.
Go ahead.
Again, Madam Chair, included in the packet was the 5-year capital improvement program. That's a program where staff makes recommendations to a joint committee who reviews and prioritizes those capital improvements. The only first year of the program, of the 5-year program, is taken into consideration in the budget, in the current year budget. We do look at what items did not get funded last year, and they get listed as well. As the budget process goes through and available revenues are compared to budgetary requests, this seems to be one of the areas of balancing to available revenues. This is also one of the areas that past councils have looked at on unallotment when the state has unallotted the city during the year, and is an area where the city has reduced items that have been approved. But you'll see there that the first column is the number that is in the general operating portion of the transfer to the capital improvements. The items approved are a PD video server, the playground equipment of $160,000, tightrope, and we've mentioned some of these in Mr. Gromits' presentation, cable cast for Rack 8, the city portion of a new hangar at the airport, and that's usually like a 90-10 split with federal and state funding. Rebuild Rowell Park Fishing Pier. That pier was relocated over to the new shelter. And so they are proposing to put and rebuild that pier that was relocated from Rowell Park. The tri-shell bike we talked about, as well as the extra patio space or cement work at the Dorothy Olson Aquatic Center. The next column over would be bonding projects that would be proposed from basically Public Works, and the council would review again when they reviewed the 2021 street program. You have one additional funding outside of the street program, and that would be the $1 million that you see on the far right. That is state aid money that is received for roads and bridges from the state. The next column over is the sales tax projects that at the time of compiling this was discussed, where the event rec center and rec fields were scheduled based on preliminary discussions back when the local option sales tax projects were initially scheduled. The community center and Garfield stormwater are preliminary architectural and construction manager to get it into the following years. The next column over is our waste treatment plant that is funded through rates at the waste treatment fund. Last finance meeting, Councilman Osmus had asked what the balance was on that. There is $15 million in the waste treatment fund. There is also $65 million worth of debt, and have restrictions on the use of those cash dollars because of the Public Facilities Authority and the bonds that are outstanding. Again, there's $65 million outstanding on the waste treatment, but these are additional projects that they are proposing. And then the far right column, as you see there, are outside funding sources through state and federal government. The items that you see in yellow were items that were recommended and ranked, but were removed from funding due to the availability of funds. I don't know if you want me to go through that, or if people can see those. We talked a little bit about most of those in Mr. Gromitz's presentation.
I just ask if any council members have any questions about the items in yellow that were removed or concerns. I'm not seeing any. All right. And the rest of the years are for our information. Is there anyone who has requests on 2022 through 2025, I think it is, 24, 25? Not seeing anybody asking about those either, so. We do have the equipment vehicle, and I know Chief Hansen has been with us, and I believe he chairs that committee. Is that a conversation we want to, is there anything we want regarding that or to ask him about? Administrator Gramitz?
Well, I would expect that Mr. Hansen would appreciate his assistant fire chief vehicle. Number one, but basically the group did meet. They went through the vehicles. They made a list of which ones to be replaced, and given the priorities, I identified the ones that should go on, and did not add two items on there. One was the assistant chief or the deputy chief vehicle, and the larger mower with attachments for the fire station. Other than that, the rest were recommended for replacement. And if need be, it's been noted that a few of these particular pieces of equipment and or vehicles could be slid back a year or two. It's maybe not, they're not going to die on the street, mind you, but as the repair and maintenance cost goes up, the goal is to get those vehicles out of the system and replace them. So with that, you see that the Civic Center, Community Development, Fire Department, Police Department, Public Works and Wastewater all had like a substantial amount of requests, 998,000 for the city and 407 for wastewater, for a total of 1.4, which when it's all taken into account, it's probably closer to 1.3. That is actually found in the budget. Any questions?
All right, that basically takes us what we wanted to walk through tonight as it relates to the general fund and the capital outlay. So looking for any questions from any of the council members right now, or comments, requests? Not seeing any. Mayor Calvin, any requests, comments? All right. With that really concludes the part of the meeting. Oh, Mayor Calvin, are you there?
Yes, I have no request. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That really concludes the part that we needed the full council for. unless there is any other comments right now, you are welcome to stay, but I thank you all for being here. Councilmember Meske, did you want to comment? You're just waving at us?
Just saying goodbye.
All right. Okay. Thank you, and thank you to staff for the good work, and it was great to have our new council members. I hope this was helpful when it comes to budget information, and I would encourage you, just as I do all the other council members, if you have any questions or requests, that we give staff a chance to look up the information and ask questions. And I see Administrator Gramitz would like to speak.
Yeah, before, the other council members leave, I guess I do want to point out that as you think about the budget, you can reduce the budget, for 2021. You can leave the budget as it is and then take action within 2021 to not spend the money that you had allocated. Let's say local government aid gets reduced, and so the last half of the year we got to reduce our spending. You got capital that you could delay. You could actually delay filling positions, whether they're new or existing. If somebody retires, you could wait 3 months. You can reduce overtime. You can reduce operational expenses. Some communities are looking at a citywide furlough of 2 weeks. When the number finally gets known, everybody takes 2 weeks off without pay. Now, nobody likes that, but you got to come up with the money somehow. Plus, I'll just end on the financial side, so you have some thought as you think about the budget and everything within it, that the city is in a very good fiscal position. We talked about it last time. We've got emergency funds that we can tap into. We're at 115% of our general fund balance. And the auditor recommends 35 to 50. So if LGA gets cut, let's say $1 million, you can reduce some expenses, but you also have enough resources on hand that you can tap into should you want to continue to purchase particular vehicles and or fund different projects. So it's not the end of the world, and there's 2 ways of going about it. So you have plenty of time between now and when we adopt the budget to think about, do we do this? Do we do option A or option B? And if we do option B, we have opportunity within the year to reduce our expenditures to meet any cuts that we may find. So I just wanted to end with that parting thought that it's not the end of the world if we do get cut. The city has actually planned for this particular situation, so we'll see what happens. But that decision is up to the city council.
Thank you, Administrator Gramitz. I appreciate your comments, and also I think for us to look at the flexibility of the budget versus when we actually spend the money. So, and I think both last meeting when we talked about our cash balances and tonight has been helpful for us to do what's right for our community. So, Mr. Elkins, do you have anything else you'd like to comment right now?
I think Mr. Gramitz mentioned it very well as far as the budget. There was just 2 things that I was going to add: the budget, and that is a working document that flows as we progress through the year. The only 2 actions that will be at the Truth and Taxation hearing that will be asked of the council. The first one will be to approve the tax levy that has been preliminarily certified of $6.8 million. And the second will be to, at that point, adopt the total budget, which can be changed, as Mr. Gramitz has mentioned.
Okay. Thank you very much. Not seeing any other comments? If not, thank you to everyone, and we will move on to our action items that we have. So everybody's welcome to stay, or you can all wave goodbye and go eat something. Or what was Mr. Gramitz doing before we started this, did he say? I'm just kidding. Okay. All right, here we go. let's see, our first action item, and actually it is Mr. Gramitz, I think, that's presenting this, is on the Candioi County Law Enforcement Agreement.
Yes, Madam Chair, I've been in discussions with the county administrator as well as Mr. Okins as we're putting together the 2021 budget. And the one item that that did come up was, you know, what is going to be our annual payment for operations when the debt falls off in 2020. So we've been in contact, we've had discussions. Out of that has come amendment number 1 to the Candioi County City of Wilmer Law Enforcement Center Agreement, which you should all have a copy of. And so you've got the agreement, you've got the schematic design area analysis, which reflects who has what area in square footage. You've got the addendum number 1 that the city attorney and also the oversight committee, of which Police Chief Felt and Councilor Osmus participated in, I believe it was last week. And so we've reviewed that. We've looked at the expenses that the county has identified that are appropriate for the law enforcement center and divided those out by the 45.7%, which is the city portion. And we end up with roughly, you know, $165,500 as what it takes to operate the law enforcement center for our share of the building. And so what you have before you is an action form that basically reiterates all of that information and reflects that the city's budget includes an amount adequate to cover the $165,435, which has been allocated to the city of Wilmer. That's what I say too. And I'm open to any questions people may have on the information presented.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to adopt that resolution that's being recommended by staff for the amendment number 1 to Candioi County Law Enforcement, City of Wilmer Law Enforcement Agreement from 2000?
Osmus, I will adopt a resolution to enter an agreement on amendment number 1 with Candioi County that determines to distribute utility and maintenance expenses of the facility. Both parties.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Plowman. Councilmember Osmus, any other comments you'd like to make from serving on that?
No, other than it's been an equitable arrangement for 20 years, and it looks like the division is good, and I don't know why we shouldn't move forward with it.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? All right, Mr. Okins, roll call.
Councilman Plowman.
Aye.
Councilman Osmus.
Aye, would you like my beagle to join in?
Yeah, you could at least pick it up and show it to us while we're listening.
Councilman Nelson.
Aye.
Councilman Fagerly.
Aye.
4 ayes.
All right, that motion carries, and we have one more, and that's the local option sales tax project costs. And Mr. Gramitz, you would like to talk about that?
I can, you bet. In the process of allocating costs so that we can identify the budgets for the specific local option sales tax projects, we've identified two that need some guidance from the city council. And we've talked about them before. We've brought them up and we always said, well, we'll get to them later. And now is later. And so the first one is the legal fees, that our city attorney is charging the city to, review contracts with the architect and the construction manager and to go through that whole process of reviewing all the legal aspects. Currently that's being applied to the city. But if you actually do, kind of like accurate, like fund accounting, you'd be going, those costs are being allocated or, to the general city, but they're actually being derived from the local option sales tax, and should they not be paid from that? So that's the first one. How does the city council want to handle legal fees? Because we know, like, the architect is being applied against each project they're associated with, the construction manager is, staff is not, we're not applying our time against those particular projects, but any money spent, normally outside of the city, such as legal fees, could be considered. It would reduce the amount available for projects, and that's a concern, that we've been seeing with some of the projects that have been bid out, is that we thought 2 million would cover it, but we're finding out that 3 million would have been better to make it actually happen. So the second item is small, but when you add it up on a $10 million project, could be quite expensive, and that is charging a city permit and like the access fees for each project. Now, there aren't too big of building permit fees for like the ball diamonds and things like that, except that if there's a concession stand or dugouts, which would constitute like a structure, then the building permit fee would come into play. So when you talk about the $6 million recreation fields, unless we do the dome, there's very small portion of it is building permit eligible. But the $10 million event center, like most all of that is, and that's like, I can't remember what the number was, Steve, but $45,000 or something like that. So that's $45,000 you can't use to build something of the facility. So the question is, in the past, the city council has waived those fees, and in the past, sometimes they didn't. I noticed one of the minutes said the council denied the county building to waive the fees, and yet at the same time, they waived the fees for the humane shelter, or the Humane Society building. So it's kind of a hit or miss. In past years, sometimes the council did, sometimes they didn't. So we're putting that before finance tonight, so that the city council can make a decision on whether or not they charge legal fees to the projects, or building permit and other fees that historically would be charged if it was anybody else but us. So that's the background.
Okay, thank you. I did ask if we knew how much our legal fees were to date. I mean, what's the estimate that we're thinking about? I struggle with this one a little bit, in that these are projects that the city is doing because of the local option sales tax. And at the same time, having been a part of that committee, it intertwines with the things that we're already doing. And so it's kind of like all of these projects are coming back and saying, well, we can't do all of this. The city really should do this, and the city really should do that. And right now we can't there's some things that we can't do. But, you know, the legal fees is something we're writing a check out for. With the permit charges, would we be writing a check out to ourselves, or are these fees that are being paid multiple places?
Could be to ourselves if you're, if we're writing the building permit fees out. Now, one thing that you probably would not be able to waive would be the state surcharge. You know, we'd still have to have a building permit. Okay, so we would file the paperwork. So what you're waiving is the building permit fee, but the 0.5% state surcharge would still have to get paid. So that check would go to the state because it was something that was constructed. We can't get out of that, but we wouldn't write the check, nor would we receive it for the base building permit fee.
So would the legal fees be a conflict with what we've been asking the curlers to do? I mean, they're building a building, they're raising funds, and the building's going to be ours when it's done. So how would that be any different than these projects when it comes to legal costs?
Well, that might be closer. Maybe that's associated with like when you denied the county not to waive the fee.
But
or it could be close enough to the Humane Society where you did waive the check, for the building permit fee. So I mean, it's a policy decision.
I was relating it to that the city will end up owning
Right.
it when we're done. We didn't end up owning the historical society or the county building, but if it's a project that's being done that the city's going to end up owning, that's what I was trying to compare it to. Councilmember Osmus, you wanted to ask a question too, so I don't know.
No, I was just going to make the motion so we could start discussing it.
Oh, okay.
I'll make the motion to not charge city local option sales tax projects for legal costs associated with contract review and only charge for the state surcharge for any building permits and water access charges and sewer access charges.
Second.
Okay, let's have some discussion. Where are you guys at? Councilmember Osmus.
I'm in favor of it. Just having to pay the state service charge, surcharge, and the legal fees. I kind of feel like we can absorb those. Just because I do know that most of the projects are going to come up short and of what their intention was, and it's just who knew when we were making those budgets, they had to throw out a number, and without having architectural drawings and an idea of what the true cost would be, they thought they were high enough, and they just haven't been. So I just feel like that's something that the city can absorb, because I think I would like to see those go into the projects for the future, because we are going to have them for 50, 20, 30, 40, 50 years on some of those. And for 1 year, I mean, I think we can absorb some of the legal fees.
So I'm just going to challenge you. I'm struggling with this one, so I'm just going to challenge you. What should we absorb it into? What should we not do because we're paying the legal fees? If you look at things that we aren't able to fund this year with our budget, or if we have cuts, how do we do this? And I guess the question I had, and I don't know if Mr. Elkins is prepared to do an estimate or not, but are we talking $50,000? Are we, by the time we're done? What are those figures? And if the funds aren't going to come from there, then where are we going to get the funds from, and what are we not going to do to be able to do this? Because we do pass judgment on our legal fees regularly. So, Mr. Gramitz, I'm sorry, I'm rambling.
Yeah, I mean, here's a thought, and maybe Steve has run into this in the past, and maybe not, but could we put the building permit amount and the legal fees on a kind of like an accounts payable that we carry forward? We don't fund it with sales tax now, but 12 years from now, when all the debt is paid off and we've got excess funds of X dollars, it normally happens that way, that you have, you know, some leftover money that you apply it to those, that accounts payable out of the sales tax at the end. After all the debt is paid for, you got nothing else to spend the money on, then you pay for these costs. And granted, it's 12 years in advance, but it's not like you're giving it up 100%. You anticipate getting it at the end. I don't know if that's possible.
Mr. Elkins?
Yes, that's very definitely doable. What we would do is set up like a payable or a liability, and then at the time of the expiration of the sales tax, as you indicated, if there are excess, you can reduce that and pay that off. If there isn't, then the council at that time would basically write it off. But that way you can record it and track it.
Councilmember Osmus?
Okay, I like that idea. Also, I would think I thought there's been some talk about, because of COVID, and that they were talking about possibly extending some of those local option sales tax contracts. I would hope we would be able to take advantage of that. But I would definitely like to see if there's extra money that maybe we could come back and recover these in the possibly 12 years.
Okay.
But right now, absorb it.
Okay, my concern with that is that we ran into trouble last time where we were collecting funds beyond the time and beyond the projects. And so if we expect that this is going to be part of the finance charge, then we really need to charge the local option sales tax projects for that in order to be able to collect that back. If you're saying that that's, you know, just like collecting interest on bonds, I would question our ability to collect something we said we were going to be willing to pay for as a city. And you know, maybe I'm wrong with that, but I think we better be careful when we, you know, the community expects us to spend the money wisely, and what we got was 30 million plus interest. And, you know, so we need to be responsible with that time frame and what we do with that. I'm a local option sales tax supporter, but I'm also recognizing that the city is going to need to do lots of things with these projects that are going to cost the city money also. And so it's kind of that chicken or egg, and you can look at them with the lights out at Swanson Fields. We don't have $750,000 right now to put up more lights. That's not probably the priority when it comes to streets or those types of things. So I'm struggling with this one with the what's our responsibility. And yet, if there's a way to do this, I get it that it's benefiting us, and these are things that we want and need to do. I just want to make sure that we're being fair. You know, just like you commented about who do we make deals with, and or not deals, but who do we waive fees for, and who don't we waive fees for? And this one to me, and I'm going to speak again for the curlers, I think maybe when they're done, you know, maybe we should pick up the tab for the legal fees because it's ours. I don't know, you know, if they get it done, but I'm a little concerned about the precedents that we're just picking up the tab. Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same. I'm in the same boat because I think those are valid. I think those are valid arguments. I have a really hard time wrapping my brain around the concept of taxing taxes. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it seems like there's redundancy there. So if you're collecting taxes and then you use that tax money to pay more fees, which are essentially taxes, it just seems like so much of the money is now being burnt up in taxes, which is indicative of bureaucratic government and red tape. And I don't know, it's almost like, how do we get the best bang for our buck? And we're always trying to think of ways to maximize the impact and maximize the spread of our dollar. And I do understand the points that have been made in terms of precedent and in terms of where is the money going to come from. Those are good questions. They're valid questions that need to be answered, but at the same time, I feel like it's almost oxymoronic to be paying fees or taxes using money that has already been collected as a tax. I worry about the precedence of doing that. So that's just my own thought that I'm struggling with. Thanks.
Councilmember Fagerly, do you have any words of wisdom to this, please?
I like the approach that if there's money left after 12 years, it'd be paid back to the city for legal and the permit fees. As for the curlers, yeah, that building might come back to us, but the curlers are be able to use it for 6 or 7 months. They're going to schedule their programs there, so it's a little different than these projects where the city is going to be actually owning and operating them. So, I mean, like the library, the very first one we did, we had excess of like $168,000. The money came in early and we did sunset it early too, but there was money left over and we still have some. We just got done using it up now. So I don't see an issue if there's money left over to reimburse the city for those fees, even if it's 12 years. So.
Okay, thank you. I feel like I want to speak in favor of the local option sales tax projects because I truly believe that in order to do the projects right, the city may have to do something with its tax dollars in addition to the local option sales tax dollars over the years in order for the project to end up being what we need. So if this is one way of doing that, that's fine, but I think we need to be honest with the fact that we will be helping to complete these projects all the way around. And if this is something that sets us off in that direction, that's fine, as long as we're doing it legally. I'll add that, and I'll leave that statement up to how we want to do it. But I do think we have to be careful that we are equal to different parties also. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Okay, we need to have a roll call.
Councilman Osmus,
Aye.
Councilman Nelson,
Aye.
Councilman Fagerly,
Aye.
Councilman Plowman,
Aye.
4 ayes.
All right, that motion carries. All right. Only thing left I think that we need to do tonight is just we'll see if anybody else has any questions, but Mr. Okens, do you have any department information updates?
Not tonight. Busy time of the year. Happy holidays for everybody. Hope everybody is safe and healthy.
Thank you. Administrator Gramitz?
Nothing to add tonight.
All right. Any council members and Councilmember Plowman? Requests, information, anything?
No, it's nice that we were able to fit in an extra meeting here and just to have that information presented to, I was just kind of taking notes as I went, where a lot of us are quiet, but it's still good information to take, and sometimes it jogs something loose in the memory later. So I appreciate being able to do that. Otherwise, everybody else enjoy your down week until next time.
Okay, Mr. Okens, I see you waving at us.
Yeah, I do have, I'm still waiting on a response from the Department of Revenue for Councilman Plowman's request from last time on the timing of collections. So.
Okay. And I know you put a request in kind of for the estimate on legal expenses. Is that something that you might be able to email out to us before our council meeting if you get it?
Yes, I did receive a response. He had estimated it at 20,000, but they are going to have the actual numbers And we'll probably have it broken down by project for the council meeting on Monday.
Okay. Councilmember Fagerly, anything else?
I just had a question on those vehicles that might be replaced. Are you going through the state system to buy them, or are you going to buy locally?
I think that decision will be made when authorization to proceed is obtained.
Okay, because it is the end of the year and there's a lot of good deals locally, so
Oh, sure.
I
Yeah.
just want to make sure we get the best deal.
Yep.
So I support buying local. We just have to define what local is, right? We've had that discussion before too. So Councilmember Rasmus.
My comment is kind of a throwback to our discussion from the full council as well on the budget. Is I appreciated Mr. Gramit's hearing what the Park and Rec staff is doing and if they're helping out other departments, because I'm just worried about those positions, and especially like Alex Sobiak, the newest hire with the I think she's got the youth activities. It's tough. And I don't envy her position of trying to figure out what they're supposed to be doing. And I wouldn't want to lose them. So like you said, we have good staff. We want to be able to keep them, but I'm glad to hear that we are utilizing them. I know in the summer it was easier to help out Park and Rec with mowing, with other upkeep. And I was concerned about this winter, what job opportunities there would be for them. But thank you for the answer.
Yeah, the other departments, and I can speak for finance, is that we do have jobs that a lot of times get just kind of put on the shelf, but we will and really appreciate them coming to the other departments and helping out. And it also it helps in communication as far as them understanding all the different processes as well. So it's working well for them to help out other departments.
I just want to thank everyone, and one of the goals that I've had with reviewing this budget is I'm afraid for the next 2 years for us. And I think for us to understand the budget and to make decisions based off from that with what's in the best interest of Wilmer, and do we use cash reserves? Do we have to do different things? I just think we have to be aware of what we're doing and how we can do it. And so I'm thankful for the information that we went through and for the contributions that the council members have made. So I'll just close with please, if there's any other questions before our next meeting where we have to make decisions, please, the more discussion we have, the better we all get to the same place at the right time, kind of thing with that. And I think we all feel strongly about our community and wanting to do what's in its best interest. So, and I think that's hard right now. So anyway, I thank you for that. I see caller number 2. That must be Mr. O'Brien. Did you hang in there with us?
I did.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. I hope that this was helpful for you. So we'll look forward to working with you, and anything left before our future agenda items are staying as future agenda items. And if I don't see anyone say anything else, we will look for a motion to adjourn. Everybody wants to go home? All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.